MacDill Field, Tampa, Florida, November 1942. A young pilot walks toward his assigned aircraft, palms sweating, heart hammering against his ribcage. Around him, ground crews work in grim silence. Nobody jokes anymore. Nobody laughs. In the past 30 days, 15 B-26 Marauders have gone down. 15 aircraft, 56 men. The phrase, circulating through every barracks, whispered like a curse. One a day in Tampa Bay. The pilot reaches his bomber and stops. The Martin B-26 Marauder sits on the tarmac like a mechanical paradox, sleek, bullet-shaped fuselage tapering to a narrow tail, two massive Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engines mounted on wings that seem impossibly, fatally short. 65 feet of wingspan trying to support 37,000 pounds of aircraft, bombs, fuel, and crew. The math doesn't lie. The wing loading exceeds 50 pounds per square foot, higher than any bomber the Army Air Corps has ever accepted. Someone behind him mutters what everyone's thinking. Flying coffin. What this pilot doesn't know, what nobody at MacDill Field can possibly imagine, is that this despised, feared, accident-prone bomber will transform into the most effective medium bomber of World War II, that by war's end it will have the lowest loss rate of any American bomber in the European theater, less than 0.5%. That crews will fly it on over 110,000 combat sorties, delivering 150,000 tons of bombs with devastating accuracy. That one particular B-26, a battle-scarred warrior named Flak Bait, will survive 202 combat missions, more than any other American aircraft in the entire war. The story of how the Widowmaker became a legend begins not with courage or innovation, but with desperation and a contract signed before a single prototype ever flew. March 11th, 1939. Adolf Hitler's armies are preparing to devour Poland. War is coming to Europe, and everyone knows it. The United States Army Air Corps issues Circular Proposal 39-640, a specification demanding what seems impossible, a twin-engine medium bomber capable of 350 miles per hour, a range of 3,000 miles, carrying 2,000 pounds of bombs to a service ceiling exceeding 20,000 feet. The Glenn L. Martin Company of Middle River, Maryland, responds with Model 179. 26-year-old aeronautical engineer Peyton M. Magruder leads the design team. The specifications are aggressive, borderline reckless. To achieve the required speed, Magruder's team makes a calculated decision that will haunt them. They select a shoulder-mounted wing with a span of just 65 feet. Small wings mean less drag. Less drag means higher speed. The trade-off is brutal. Wing loading will exceed 50 pounds per square foot, creating takeoff and landing characteristics unlike anything American pilots have experienced. July 5, 1939. The Army Air Corps evaluates 4 proposals: Martin, North American, Douglas, and Stearman. Martin's design is so far ahead of the competition that they make an unprecedented decision. They award a contract for 201 aircraft without requiring a prototype, not a single test flight, not one proving trial. The Martin B-26 Marauder goes from drawing board to production order in a single meeting. September 1940, before the first aircraft has flown, the Army orders 930 more. The pressure on Martin is crushing. They have contracts for over 1,100 bombers based entirely on calculations, wind tunnel tests, and faith in engineering theory. November 25, 1940. Martin test pilot William K. Ken Ebel, co-pilot Ed Fenimore, and flight engineer Al Malewski climb into the first B-26 at Middle River. Ebel advances the throttles. The twin Pratt & Whitney R2805 engines roar, each producing 1,850 horsepower. The bomber accelerates down the runway. It takes every foot of available concrete before the stubby wings generate enough lift. The Marauder claws into the air, flying on raw power rather than elegant aerodynamics. The test flight reveals both promise and peril. Top speed, 315 miles per hour at 15,000 feet. Service ceiling, 25,000 feet. Range, 1,000 miles with a 3,000-pound bomb load. The performance meets most specifications, but the handling characteristics are unforgiving. The landing speed exceeds 130 miles per hour, 50 miles per hour faster than pilots are accustomed to flying on final approach. One engine failure during takeoff or landing means almost certain catastrophe. There's no margin for error, no forgiveness for mistakes. The engineering team knows they've created something dangerous. But contracts have been signed. Production lines are being built. War is spreading across Europe like wildfire. There's no time to redesign. The Marauder will go to war exactly as conceived, a fast, deadly bomber that demands perfection from every pilot who flies it. February 1941. The 22nd Bombardment Group at Langley Field, Virginia, becomes the first unit to receive operational B-26s. The transition from their antiquated B-18 Bolos should be straightforward. It becomes a nightmare. The nose gear struts fail repeatedly. The aircraft's tricycle landing gear configuration is unfamiliar to pilots trained on conventional tailwheel designs. The high landing speed intimidates everyone, but the most terrifying characteristic emerges during single-engine operations. Pilots quickly discover that if one engine fails during takeoff, the asymmetric thrust and high wing loading create an immediate crisis. The B-26 can fly on one engine, barely, but it requires instant, precise responses. Any hesitation, any mistake, and the bomber rolls inverted and plunges into the ground. Training accidents multiply. December 7, 1941. Pearl Harbor. The 22nd Bombardment Group deploys to Australia the very next day, taking their untested, barely understood bombers straight into combat. On April 5, 1942, B-26s conduct their first combat mission against Rabaul, New Guinea. The Japanese quickly realize these American bombers are fast but vulnerable. The small wings that provide speed at altitude become a liability in the Pacific's low-level combat environment. June 4, 1942, the Battle of Midway. 4 Army Air Corps B-26s from the 22nd Bombardment Group attack Japanese aircraft carriers with torpedoes, flying at wave-top height. Exposed to devastating anti-aircraft fire, they bore in on targets defended by hundreds of guns. Not one torpedo hits. 2 B-26s are destroyed outright. The 2 that return are so riddled with damage they're immediately written off as total losses. The crews fly with extraordinary courage, but the aircraft proves unsuited for torpedo attacks. The Pacific Theater reveals a fundamental truth. The B-25 Mitchell requires less runway, has greater range, and handles better in the island-hopping environment. By mid-1943, all B-26s are withdrawn from the Pacific and sent to North Africa and Europe. The Mitchell becomes the Pacific's medium bomber of choice, but the real nightmare is unfolding not in combat, but at training bases across the United States. MacDill Field, Tampa, Florida, becomes the primary training center for B-26 crews. The base sits on a peninsula jutting into Tampa Bay, surrounded by water on 3 sides. When training accidents occur, and they occur with horrifying regularity, the bombers often plunge into the bay. The statistics are devastating. In late 1942, 15 crashes occur in a single 30-day period. 34 training accidents claim 56 lives despite perfect flying weather and unobstructed approaches. Between August 5, 1942 and October 8, 1943, just 14 months, 13 B-26s ditch in Tampa Bay. This doesn't count the crashes on land. The nicknames proliferate like an epidemic of despair. Widowmaker, Martin Murderer. Flying Coffin, B-Crash. The most cutting nickname reflects the bomber's stubby wings. The Flying Prostitute, so fast, with no visible means of support. Baltimore Whore, a reference to Martin's hometown. Pilots begin refusing to fly the B-26. Transfer requests flood headquarters. Civilian ferry pilots, contracted to deliver aircraft to bases across the country, start quitting their jobs rather than fly Marauders. The whispered phrase becomes an anthem of dread. One a day in Tampa Bay. Fear spreads through medium bomber groups like poison. At one point, every pilot in the 320th Bombardment Group, except the commanding officer and his executive, formally requests reassignment. They'd rather face combat in inferior aircraft than train in the Marauder. The root causes are multiple and deadly. The Curtiss electric propellers suffer from wiring faults that cause them to go to flat pitch, runaway condition, at high RPM. When this happens during takeoff, the result is instant catastrophe. Ground crews, unfamiliar with the B-26's complex electrical systems, repeatedly run down batteries during maintenance, leading to power failures and loss of propeller pitch control during the most critical phase of flight. The tricycle landing gear remains unfamiliar and unforgiving. But the fundamental issue is the wing loading combined with inadequate pilot training. Young pilots, rushed through training to feed the expanding war effort, simply don't have the experience necessary to handle the Marauder's demanding characteristics. September 1942. The situation deteriorates further. Aviation pioneer and company founder Glenn L. Martin receives a summons that will change everything. He's called before the Senate Special Committee to investigate the National Defense Program, the Truman Committee, investigating defense contracting abuses. The committee's chairman is Senator Harry S. Truman of Missouri. A former artillery captain from World War I, Truman has built a reputation as a tenacious investigator who doesn't tolerate corporate excuses or military bureaucracy. The committee arrives at Avon Park Bombing Range, Florida, for their inspection. As if scripted for maximum dramatic impact, when Senator Truman and his colleagues step from their vehicles, they're greeted by the still-burning wreckage of two B-26s that crashed earlier that morning. Smoke rises from twisted aluminum. The smell of aviation fuel and death hangs in the humid Florida air. The hearing that follows becomes legendary. Senator Truman, known for his blunt, no-nonsense style, fixes Glenn Martin with a hard stare. "Mr. Martin, why does the B-26 have so many problems?" Martin, an aviation pioneer who built his first aircraft in 1909, responds with technical explanations, aerodynamic principles, engineering trade-offs, performance requirements. He concludes with what he believes is the definitive argument. The wings are too short, but the plans are too far along, and besides, we already have the contract. The silence in the room stretches for 3 heartbeats. Truman leans forward, his voice carrying the weight of dead American pilots. "Mr. Martin, if that's your position, then your contract will be canceled. You won't get another." Glenn Martin's expression changes instantly. "Senator, if that's how it's going to be, we'll fix it." By February 1943, the B-26B-10 model emerges from Martin's production lines with 6 additional feet of wingspan, 71 feet total. The vertical stabilizer is increased in height. The angle of wing incidence is raised to improve takeoff performance. The nose gear is lengthened, increasing propeller ground clearance. Uprated R-2841 engines produce 2,000 horsepower each. Armor is added to protect pilots and crew. The defensive armament is increased from 6 to 12 50-caliber machine guns, but modifications alone won't save the Marauder. The bomber needs an advocate who can restore confidence and prove it can be flown safely. Enter Brigadier General James H. Doolittle, fresh from his legendary April 1942 raid on Tokyo, arguably the most famous aviator in America. In October 1942, General Henry H. Arnold, commanding general of the Army Air Forces, personally directs Doolittle to investigate the B-26 problem. Doolittle has just been given command of the B-26-equipped 4th Medium Bombardment Wing, scheduled to participate in the invasion of North Africa. Doolittle conducts his own evaluation flights. He discovers what experienced combat pilots already know. The Marauder is unforgiving but not inherently dangerous. It simply demands precision. Years later, Doolittle will recall, "The B-26 was an unforgiving airplane and it was ending pilots because it never gave them a chance to make mistakes." Doolittle sends Captain Vincent W. "Squeak" Burnett, his technical advisor, on a tour of training bases to demonstrate proper B-26 operations. Burnett conducts low-altitude flights with one engine feathered, something trainees believe impossible. He deliberately turns into the dead engine, violating every safety rule, proving the maneuver can be executed safely with proper technique. He demonstrates slow flight characteristics and recoveries from unusual attitudes. The Army Air Forces takes an additional, unprecedented step. They recruit 17 women Air Force service pilots, WASPs, to fly demonstration flights in B-26s. The message is clear and deliberate. If women can fly the Marauder safely, male pilots have no excuse. It's psychological warfare against fear, and it works. Martin sends engineers to training bases to educate crews on proper loading, weight distribution, and center of gravity calculations. They demonstrate how overloading creates deadly handling characteristics during critical flight phases. The combined efforts begin paying dividends. Within weeks, the accident rate drops dramatically. Training procedures are revised. Pilots receive more thorough instruction before transitioning to the B-26. Minimum flight hour requirements are increased. The Truman Committee, satisfied that real changes are being implemented, withdraws its recommendation to halt production. By mid-1943, the B-26 is no longer the most dangerous aircraft in American inventory, but it remains demanding, unforgiving, and feared by inexperienced pilots. The combat theater will prove whether the modifications and improved training have transformed the Marauder into a weapon worth the cost. November 1942, North Africa. The Allied invasion, Operation Torch, brings 3 B-26 bombardment groups to the theater, the 17th, 319th, and 320th. They arrive expecting to conduct medium-altitude precision bombing. Instead, they're immediately thrown into low-level attacks against heavily defended German and Italian positions. The early missions are catastrophic. The B-26 groups fly low-level attacks against supply depots, airfields, and troop concentrations in Tunisia. German 88mm flak guns and fighter aircraft decimate the formations. The Marauder's small wings, optimized for speed, make them vulnerable to battle damage. Unlike the B-17 Flying Fortress with its thick, durable wing structure, the B-26's efficient but delicate airfoil can't absorb much punishment. A single flak burst can sever control cables or rupture fuel tanks, transforming the sleek bomber into a falling coffin. The Marauders prove brutally effective in one specialized role, destroying German transport aircraft. Operating as long-range fighters far out over the Mediterranean, B-26s intercept Messerschmitt, Me-323 Gigant, and Junkers Ju-52 transport formations attempting to resupply German forces in Tunisia. The lumbering transports, slow and poorly defended, fall like wheat before a scythe. B-26s destroy them by the dozens, strangling German logistics. But against ground targets defended by concentrated flak, the loss rate is unsustainable. By the end of the North African campaign, the three B-26 groups have flown 1,587 sorties and lost 80 aircraft, double the loss rate of B-25 units operating in the same theater. The lesson is written in burning aluminum and blood. Low-level attacks are suicide. The B-26 must operate at medium altitude where its speed becomes an asset, and the small wings reduce its profile to flak gunners. May 1943, England. The 8th Air Force receives its first B-26 units. The 322nd Bombardment Group arrives, eager to prove the Marauder's worth against the Luftwaffe's best. Their first missions are reconnaissance flights and familiarization exercises over occupied France. May 14, 1943. The first operational mission, a partial success. Crews return shaken but intact. May 17, 1943. The second mission targets German installations at IJmuiden and Haarlem in the Netherlands. 12 B-26s take off. One aborts due to mechanical failure. 11 bombers press the attack at low altitude, hoping to achieve precision against tactical targets. What follows is complete annihilation. German flak batteries, forewarned and positioned perfectly, open up as the Marauders begin their bomb runs. The sky fills with exploding steel. The bombers, flying low and relatively slow compared to their high-altitude capabilities, are sitting targets. Fighters swoop in, adding their guns to the slaughter. All 11 B-26 are shot down. Some explode in mid-air. Others cartwheel into the Dutch countryside, trailing fire and disintegrating as they fall. A few attempt emergency landings only to crash and burn. 18 men die. The survivors become prisoners of war. The disaster nearly ends the B-26's career in Europe before it truly begins. The 8th Air Force, focused on high-altitude strategic bombing with B-17 flying fortresses, has no use for a medium bomber with a completely different performance envelope that can't defend itself in hostile European skies. But the 9th Air Force, being formed to provide tactical air support for the coming invasion of Europe, sees potential where others see failure. The 9th takes over all B-26 operations in Europe. They implement radical tactical changes drawn from hard lessons in North Africa and the Mediterranean. Medium-altitude attacks become doctrine. B-26 formations will bomb from 10,000 to 15,000 feet, high enough to reduce flak effectiveness but low enough to maintain reasonable accuracy. Fighter escorts become mandatory. Spitfires provide protection at a ratio of 4 fighters for every bomber, with authority to scrub missions if conditions become too dangerous. Formation tactics are refined. The 319th Bombardment Group pioneers 3-ship and 6-ship abreast formation takeoffs while operating from Decimo Manu, Sardinia, a technique that allows entire squadrons to assemble rapidly and reach altitude together. The modifications to the aircraft itself continue improving combat effectiveness. The B-26B and B-26C models feature the extended wingspan, increased vertical stabilizer, and uprated engines. Defensive armament is increased to 1150 caliber M2 Browning machine guns, 1 flexible in the nose, 4 fixed in fuselage blisters fired by the pilot, 2 in a Martin dorsal turret, 2 in the tail turret, and 1 each in port and starboard waist positions. Later models add even more guns, creating overlapping fields of fire that make the B-26 a dangerous target for intercepting fighters. The bomb bay can accommodate 2 2,000-pound bombs, 8 500-pound bombs, or 16 250-pound bombs. Normal combat load is 3,000 pounds. though the maximum capacity reaches 4,800 pounds at the cost of range and altitude performance. July 1943. The tactical changes and aircraft improvements begin showing results. The 3rd Bomb Wing flies its first missions without losses, thanks largely to excellent Spitfire escorts. Confidence grows. Crews develop respect for the Marauder's capabilities, its speed, its rugged construction, its concentrated firepower. Air Marshal Sir John Slessor, Deputy Commander-in-Chief Mediterranean Allied Air Forces, writes about the B-26 units under his command with genuine admiration. The astonishing accuracy of the experienced medium bomber groups, particularly the Marauders. I think that the 42nd Bombardment Group in Sardinia is probably the best day bomber unit in the world. The Marauder is proving itself in combat. But the true test is coming. January 1944, Allied planners are preparing for Operation Overlord, the invasion of France. Success depends on isolating the Normandy beaches from German reinforcements. The transportation network throughout France must be systematically destroyed. Bridges over the Seine, Loire, and smaller rivers. Railway junctions and marshalling yards. Roads used for troop movement. The mission requires precision attacks against hardened targets defended by concentrated flak batteries. The B-26 groups of the 9th Air Force are assigned the most critical interdiction missions. They become known as the Bridge Busters. The accuracy required is unprecedented. Bridges are small, difficult targets. A bomb must strike within feet of the structure to cause damage. Miss by 30 feet, and the bridge stands, traffic continues. German reinforcements reach the invasion beaches. The Marauders employ the Norden bomb sight, America's top-secret optical computing device that calculates release points based on altitude, airspeed, wind, and target movement. In the hands of experienced bombardiers, the Norden can put bombs within a 100-foot circle from 15,000 feet. But technology alone isn't enough. The B-26 groups develop specialized tactics. Lead bombardiers, selected for their exceptional skill, guide entire formations. When the lead bombardier releases, the entire formation drops simultaneously, saturating the target area with high explosive. The 319th Bombardment Group achieves bombing accuracy so phenomenal that ground commanders request them specifically for the most difficult missions. February 1944. The interdiction campaign intensifies. B-26 formations hammer French transportation infrastructure relentlessly. The Luftwaffe, stretched thin across multiple fronts and suffering from critical fuel shortages, can mount only sporadic opposition. German flak batteries, however, remain deadly. Defending every bridge, every rail junction, every choke point, are 88-millimeter guns that can throw 20-pound shells to 25,000 feet. The flak is so thick that crews describe flying through it like navigating a physical barrier, black puffs of exploding steel filling the air, shrapnel ripping through aluminum fuselages, engines smoking, wings holed, yet the Marauders press on. The B-26's robust construction saves countless lives. The air-cooled radial engines, lacking vulnerable coolant systems, can absorb multiple hits and keep running. The fuel tanks, while not self-sealing in early models, are positioned to minimize catastrophic fires. The armor plate behind pilots and critical systems stops most small-caliber fire. Aircraft return from missions with dozens of flak holes, shredded control surfaces, hydraulic systems destroyed, yet they bring their crews home. One B-26B named Hell's Bell II, flying with the 319th Bombardment Group, reaches 100 combat missions in May 1944, the first Marauder to achieve this milestone. The bomber bears witness to hundreds of hours of combat flying, countless flak encounters, and the skill of crews who nurse damaged aircraft back to base mission after mission. May 1944. The pre-invasion bombing campaign reaches its crescendo. B-26 groups fly multiple missions daily. Bridges over the Seine are targeted systematically. German repair crews work frantically to restore destroyed spans, only to have B-26s return within hours and destroy them again. Railway marshalling yards are cratered beyond repair. Road junctions become impassable moonscapes of bomb craters. June 6, 1944. D-Day. As Allied troops storm the Normandy beaches, B-26 formations provide continuous air support. They attack German strongpoints, troop concentrations, and any attempt at counterattack. The Luftwaffe's response is feeble. Only 2 German aircraft appear over the invasion beaches all day. The systematic destruction of French transportation infrastructure has achieved its purpose. German reinforcements cannot reach the battle in time or in strength. The post-invasion period sees B-26's transition to a new role, close air support for advancing Allied armies. Operating from hastily prepared forward airfields in France, Marauder groups attack German defensive positions, artillery batteries, and troop concentrations, sometimes less than a mile ahead of American lines. The accuracy achieved is extraordinary. Ground commanders develop complete confidence in B-26 precision, requesting strikes on targets that would have been considered too close to friendly forces months earlier. December 1944, the Battle of the Bulge. German forces launch their last major offensive in the West, catching American units by surprise and driving deep into Allied lines, weather grounds most Allied aircraft during the critical early days. When the skies finally clear, B-26 groups join the aerial counterattack. They strike German supply columns, armor concentrations, and troop assembly areas. The 394th Bombardment Group, nicknamed the White-tailed Marauders, flies mission after mission in support of surrounded American forces at Bastogne. One pilot brings his heavily damaged B-26 back to base after a flak hit destroys his nose gear. He executes a perfect belly landing in low visibility, saving his entire crew. The feat earns him the Distinguished Flying Cross. By March 1945, as Allied armies cross the Rhine and drive into Germany itself, B-26 groups are flying 29,000 sorties and dropping 46,430 tons of bombs, with only 139 aircraft lost. The loss rate is so low, less than 0.5%, that statistical analysts initially question the numbers, believing they must be errors. They're not errors. They're the result of superior tactics, excellent training, capable aircraft, and crews who have mastered one of the war's most demanding bombers. Of all the B-26 Marauders built, one aircraft transcends individual achievement to become a legend, embodying the entire type's evolution from despised Widowmaker to respected warrior. B-26B-25MA, serial number 41-31773. Assigned to the 452nd Bombardment Squadron, 322nd Bombardment Group. Delivered in April 1943. The crew names her Flakbait. The name proves prophetic. Flakbait survives combat that should have destroyed her dozens of times over. She accumulates over 1,000 flak holes during her operational career. Cannon shells punch through her wings. Shrapnel tears through control surfaces. Engines are hit repeatedly. Hydraulic lines are severed. Yet, mission after mission, Flakbait brings her crews home. The ground crews, the forgotten heroes who keep the bombers flying, perform miracles. They patch holes, replace damaged skin, rebuild systems, and have Flakbait ready for the next mission within hours. The bomber becomes a talisman, a symbol of survivability in an environment designed to eliminate aircraft. Mission after mission accumulates. 50, 100, 150. The count continues rising long past the point where most aircraft are retired or lost. Different crews fly her, but all treat her with a mixture of respect and affection reserved for machines that prove themselves under fire. May 1944. Flak Bait completes her 199th mission. The next sortie, number 200, becomes a celebrated event. The 322nd Bombardment Group's commanding officers want to fly the historic mission. The regular crew is bumped. They accept the decision with understanding. Rank has privileges even in combat. But the crew returns for mission 201, and they're aboard for mission 202 on May 1st, 1945. The last combat mission flown by any B-26 against German forces. The target is the German garrison on the Ile d'Oléron off the French coast. The mission is flown without incident. Germany surrenders 7 days later. Flak Bait survives 202 combat missions over Europe, more than any other American aircraft in World War II. Her achievement stands as testament not just to one bomber's durability, but to the entire B-26 program's transformation from disaster to triumph. The final statistics tell a story of complete reversal. 5,288 Martin B-26 Marauders are built between February 1941 and March 1945. They fly 110,000 combat sorties. They drop 150,000 tons of bombs. They operate in every theater: Pacific, North Africa, Mediterranean, Europe. The combat loss rate, the number that matters most, validates every modification, every training hour, every tactical revision. Less than 0.5%. The lowest loss rate of any Allied bomber in the European theater. Lower than the B-17 Flying Fortress. Lower than the B-24 Liberator. Lower than any other bomber American forces deploy in World War II. The transformation is complete. The bomber that earned nicknames like Widowmaker and Flying Coffin finishes the war as the safest, most effective medium bomber in American service. 522 B-26s fly with the Royal Air Force and South African Air Force. Free French forces operate 7 of 9 groupes de bombardement with Marauders by war's end, flying 270 missions with 4,884 sorties. Compare the Marauders' final record against the accusations hurled during those dark days at MacDill Field. Compare the loss rate against predictions that the bomber would destroy American air crews faster than the enemy. The contrast is absolute. What made the difference? The modifications helped. The extended wingspan, the uprated engines, the increased armament. But modifications alone don't explain a transformation from 50% training losses to 0.5% combat losses. The answer lies in understanding what the B-26 demanded and what it gave in return. It demanded precision. It demanded experienced pilots who mastered exact airspeeds during every phase of flight. It demanded rigorous maintenance and proper loading. It demanded respect. In return, it gave speed that let it outrun many German fighters. It gave rugged construction that brought crews home despite damage that would destroy other bombers. It gave concentrated defensive firepower that made it a dangerous target for interceptors. It gave a bomb-carrying capacity and accuracy that destroyed bridges, rail yards, and German infrastructure with surgical precision. The B-26 didn't become an easy aircraft to fly. It remained demanding throughout its service life, but pilots who mastered it discovered they were flying one of the war's finest bombers, fast, accurate, survivable. By 1947, when the United States Air Force becomes an independent service, all Martin B-26 Marauders have been retired. The Douglas A-26 Invader, originally designated A-26 for attack, is redesignated B-26 causing decades of confusion between two completely different aircraft. Of the 5,288 Marauders built, only a handful survive today. Flak Bates, nose section, battle-scarred and unrestored, occupies a place of honor at the National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. One complete B-26 remains airworthy, preserved by private collectors who remember what the bomber achieved. The Martin B-26 Marauder's story defies simple categorization. It began as a gamble, a bomber ordered off the drawing board without a prototype, designed for speed at the cost of handling characteristics that would eliminate inexperienced pilots. The early accidents were real. The fear was justified. The nicknames reflected genuine danger. But the story didn't end at MacDill Field in 1942. It ended in May 1945 with Flak Bait completing her 202nd mission, with bridge-busting groups that could put bombs within feet of their targets, with a combat loss rate that became the envy of every other bomber command. Senator Harry Truman's intervention forced the wingspan modification. General Doolittle's demonstration flights restored confidence. The women Air Force service pilots shamed male pilots into overcoming their fears. Martin's engineers corrected the propeller problems and improved systems. The 9th Air Force developed tactics that played to the B-26's strengths. But ultimately, the bomber survived and triumphed because thousands of young American pilots mastered its demanding characteristics, because ground crews kept battle-damaged aircraft flying, because bombardiers learned to use the Norden sight with extraordinary precision, because commanders recognized that medium-altitude attacks exploited the Marauder's capabilities while minimizing its vulnerabilities. The transformation from Widowmaker to war winner took less than 2 years. In early 1943, pilots were refusing to fly it. By mid-1944, experienced B-26 crews wouldn't trade their Marauders for any other bomber in the inventory. Air Marshal Schlesser called the Marauder groups probably the best day bomber units in the world. The combat loss rate, less than 0.5%, proved him right. Over 100,000 combat sorties, 150,000 tons of bombs delivered with unprecedented accuracy, the systematic destruction of French and German infrastructure that made the Normandy invasion possible and the Allied advance unstoppable. The Martin B-26 Marauder earned every derisive nickname hurled at it during those terrible training months in 1942. It was unforgiving, it was demanding, it was dangerous in the hands of inexperienced pilots, but by war's end, it had also earned respect, admiration, and a combat record unsurpassed by any American bomber in World War II. The crews who flew it, maintained it, and fought in it, transformed a potential disaster into a weapon that helped win the war. The laughter died at MacDill Field in 1942. By 1945, the last laugh belonged to the Martin B-26 Marauder and the men who mastered it. They proved that with proper training, sound tactics, and skilled crews, even the most demanding aircraft could become a war-winning weapon. From one a day in Tampa Bay to the lowest loss rate in the European theater, from Widowmaker to 202 missions survived. That transformation remains one of World War II's most remarkable redemption stories, a testament to American adaptability, engineering persistence, and the courage of young pilots who learned to fly an unforgiving bomber and used it to devastating effect against Nazi Germany. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe and stick around for more untold stories from the skies of World War II.